Alrighty, guys, nearly a month since the last episode. I apologize for a lessening quality here without an external microphone, but that's what happens when you're on the road and you're an Australian recording from Walt Disney World in Orlando. I've been traveling for about a month here. I apologize as well for being a little bit sick, which might affect it as well, but something is better than nothing, and I thought I'd just jump in quickly with a shorter episode here before I get back home to Australia next weekend, where we'll get back on the train of delivering content multiple times a week in the lead up to training camp and obviously preseason in October as well. I know I'm a little bit late to the party, but there was a major report from NBA insider Jake Fisher on Friday in regard to the Warriors free agency and some trade interest as well in Trey Murphy III. In this episode, I'm just going to jump in quickly to that, discuss my thoughts, a potential trade that could go down, and ultimately, really, whether or not a trade can get done here with the Pelicans when it comes to Trey Murphy III. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast. Hope you've all been good over the past month. For those of you in America, hope you're enjoying the summer weather. I certainly am at the moment in Orlando. It's very hot, particularly compared to back home in Australia at the moment where it's winter. The thunderstorms here in Orlando are certainly different to what we get, particularly where I live down south in Australia. So that's certainly been something different. Feels like there's thunderstorms every day. It pisses down with rain for half an hour. We got, was it not the weekend just gone, but the weekend before, we got kind of the outskirts of Hurricane Erin, I think it was. So that was certainly something different to experience, but certainly enjoying my time. Anyway, on to Warriors basketball, of course. Before I get into the whole Trey Murphy business, I just want to start off quick update and my brief thoughts on the Jonathan Kuminga situation. When I left Australia nearly a month ago, I thought, yep, while I'm away, there might be some movement here and something will happen in regard to Jonathan Kuminga, whether that's re-signing with the Warriors or a sign and trade or anything. But that has not been the case, of course. We are now Tuesday, the 26th of August, and it seems like this could still play out for another month or so. And the fact that I've gone on a 5-week trip and there's a 5-6 week trip, and there's a good chance, I think, that the Kuminga situation is still ongoing when I get back to Australia. I would not have believed that, but that is basically the reality we've got here, because I think we're going to get to a situation where the October 1 deadline for his qualifying offer, $7.9 million qualifying offer, that's really the deadline in play here, because that's what the leverage is for Kuminga at the moment, is the qualifying offer, and whether or not either party moves in the days leading up to that. So I really think this might be a situation that comes down to late September, those final few days before the October 1 qualifying offer deadline. I expect we would get something by then. Obviously, hopefully, we get something tomorrow, or we get something in the next week or the next 2 weeks as soon as possible, and then the Warriors can obviously make their subsequent signings from there. Obviously, it's been known for a while now that the impasse on this basically stems from the Warriors offering a 2-year, $45 million extension, but with the second year including a team option. So really only 1 year of guaranteed money. Kuminga wants a player option on that second year instead. And I don't really blame JK for wanting to try and take control of his own future a little bit and not wanting to be seen as just a trade piece. Like, I can fully understand that. And so from my perspective, the way I view this situation is, if you're the Warriors and you can get Jonathan Kuminga to accept a 2-year, $45 million contract, I would just go ahead and guarantee the second year, because to me, that's not a huge, like, it's just one extra year. I don't think it reduces the trade flexibility you have. Obviously, you've got to ensure that within that, there's not a no trade clause, and there's not a player option in the second year, obviously. So I would just have it like both sides give a little and say 2 years, $45 million guaranteed. That's the deal. Again, I don't think that reduces the trade flexibility the Warriors are going to have, because I think mid-season, any team that trades for Jonathan Kuminga is probably going to want him for the second year anyway, because why would you trade for him with, unless you're giving up long-term money and you just want to get off that money. But then again, why would the Warriors want that? if you're trading for Jonathan Kuminga mid-season in January or February, the most likelihood is that you want to keep him around. You want to see what he's like on your team. So wouldn't you want that for the extra year rather than only having him for a few months and then having the threat of him leaving, right? Like, I just don't think that's necessarily what you want. So from a Warriors standpoint, I don't think that suddenly just reduces the trade flexibility and what his value would be on the trade market if there's an extra guaranteed year on his contract. The other thing here is that, like, Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green are all contracted for 2 years. So I'm not sure what kind of extra flexibility that gives you. Like, I understand the Warriors not wanting to contract Kuminga or really anyone else beyond the 2-year mark, because obviously they want to try and keep flexibility open for that 2027 offseason when Steph, Jimmy, Dre will all be out of contract as well, or at least at the moment they are. They're contracted to that point. So I can understand them not going beyond the 2 years. But for me, like, if I'm the Warrior, I just give him the second year. Give him the second year. And from Kuminga's standpoint, obviously, it's a lot easier turning down 1 year of guaranteed money at like $22.5 million and taking the qualifying offer than it is turning down $45 million. And the fact we're even talking about these numbers at less than $50 million is kind of crazy when, if you go back to when we were talking extensions and stuff back in October before the extension deadline, we're talking about this guy getting at least $100 million on his contract. So I think from a Warriors standpoint, just give in a little. Like, the qualifying offer would obviously be a disaster for both teams. So if you're the Warriors, you clearly want to see him as a trade piece. I don't particularly love that. Now, obviously, that's the case, right? And I can understand why Kuminga's saying, hey, I don't want to be a trade piece in this scenario. I get that. He wants to be seen as a building block. Whether he is that or not, people can have their own opinion on that, but I think we can all appreciate the fact that Kuminga wants to be seen as more than just a guy that, okay, you're going to bring back for a few months and then trade me to wherever in January and February. So if I'm both sides, just give a little. Warriors give the second year, and Kuminga goes without the player option and goes without a no trade clause, right? And so the Warriors I think, would still be able to trade him in January or February. The other thing to me here, quickly as I finish up on it, is, if you're the Warriors and you're clearly viewing this as we have you as we want you as a trade piece to then use your full salary in a deal in January or February, rather than obviously the base year compensation rules that allow you to only take in half that, 50% right now in the offseason. If you're the Warriors and you're clearly, obviously showcasing that we only see this guy as a trade piece, then why would rival teams come with any kind of huge offer mid-season? Like, wouldn't they be sitting back saying, well, we think you're stuck in a situation you don't really want, and so why are we going to give up anything of value? And I think we've seen that a little bit with the offers that we've seen this offseason, where the Kings offer, like initially, Devin Carter and Dario Saric in a couple of seconds, that's more of an offer of, we'll take it, we'll get rid of this for you. We'll take Kuminga off your hands because we see him as a problem for you, rather than giving up anything of value and making your team better. And I wonder how that will change mid-season. Obviously, the Warriors are going to have more flexibility because they're going to be able to take 100% back of the salary. I get that. And I think from a Warriors standpoint, you're probably hoping that mid-season there's another situation somewhere around the league where that there might be a player that's disgruntled and desperately wants out of his team, or the team desperately wants to get rid of a guy who you think might actually fit for the Warriors, kind of thing. And you can try and take advantage of that, as they did during last season when Jimmy Butler came, 6-time All-Star, and came for a price, at least from a trade standpoint, different in terms of contract, but from a trade standpoint, you got Jimmy Butler on the cheap, right? You gave up what resulted as pick 20 in the draft. You gave up Andrew Wiggins, who's a very good player, don't get me wrong, but he's not Jimmy Butler. And then you gave up Kyle Anderson, Dennis Schroeder, and Lindy Waters. It's basically Andrew Wiggins and the 20th overall pick for Jimmy Butler, right? You got him on the cheap because of how he ended his tenure in Miami, obviously making things really difficult there, to the point where they just had to get rid of him and try to get something of value back, rather than, actively trying to make their team better, kind of thing. So I think the Warriors will be hoping that something else, like there's another disaster around the league that they can take advantage of, that also allows them to move on from the Kuminga situation. But anyway, we'll move forward with that because part of this whole Kuminga discussion certainly emanated up within the Trey Murphy III reports from Jake Fisher on the Stein line on Friday. Again, I know I'm a few days late to this, but I think it's still worth me getting my thoughts and opinions out there. And I also had an article on bluemanhoop.com, who I've been continuing writing a couple articles a day here each day over the last 2 months. So check that out if you haven't already. But some of you might have already read the mock trade that I had up on there that I'll get into in a second in terms of a particular deal that the Warriors still could make here. Sorry, I'm a bit unwell. When you're traveling, you get colds and flu-like symptoms all the time. It's just part of the game, really. But yes, the mock trade I will get into here in terms of a deal that the Warriors could still make during this offseason, albeit that would be unlikely. But Fisher did report, sources say that the Warriors have a strong affinity for Murphy and have made outreach to New Orleans as recently as this summer. Yet sources say that the Pelicans typically have batted away calls to the 25-year-old, valuing him highly. The two-way forward will be playing on a contract in 2025-26 at precisely $25 million, as desirable as his talent. So would Trey Murphy be a great fit for the Warriors? Absolutely. Like, have we come across a Warrior fan yet who wouldn't want Trey Murphy III on the team? Like, this is a guy who's 6'8", is an excellent, at least he's a high volume and deep shooter. Like, his numbers, what is he, like 36% for his career, or I think 38% for his career. I think he was 36% last season. The percentages aren't spectacular necessarily, but a really good shooter, and 6'8", athletic, can get to the rim and finish. Defense is probably improving. I think the biggest thing in terms of him last season and his improvement in New Orleans was probably his playmaking and taking on a little bit more on-ball stuff, which I think the Warriors need. It's part of the reason why you can make the argument, they want to retain Kuminga is for the nights where Steph and Jimmy are resting or they're injured or whatever, and you need another on-ball creator. The Warriors could certainly do with that. But the beauty of Trey Murphy is you get some of that. He averaged, I think, 5 assists per game last season, albeit, yes, Pelicans had a lot of injuries and he got more on-ball opportunity than what you would have otherwise have thought. But he still showed signs of growth in terms of that aspect of his game. And not only do you have that, but I think he'd just be the perfect off-ball type of player to play alongside Steph and Jimmy as well, in a way that Kuminga can't be at the moment, where he's a guy that definitely needs the ball in his hands to be effective. So Trey Murphy as a fit for the Warriors would be excellent, but I think Trey Murphy as a fit for almost every team in the league would be excellent as well. And we heard from Fisher that the San Antonio Spurs also have interest. We see the report there that, the Pelicans have batted away calls at the moment. I think part of this, I think there's probably some pessimism among Warrior fans thinking as a result of this report, it's like, well, this is just the Warriors being linked to another name that they're realistically, like, they're not going to get their hands on. They don't have a path to be able to trade for Trey Murphy III. And that's what my initial thoughts were as well. And probably I still think that the Warriors trading for Trey Murphy III is very, very unlikely. It's almost impossible this offseason. It's not impossible, but I think before the season starts, I think it's very, 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 very unlikely. And then obviously once the season gets underway, anything can happen on the floor. Things might change, but it's probably still unlikely mid-season. Murphy's just starting a 4-year, $112 million contract, which, again, based on how he played last season, the improvements in his game and the fact he's still only 25, you'd say, as Fisher said, that contract will be pretty valuable. And clearly the Warriors would probably want to find a way where they could re-sign Kuminga and then try and flip Kuminga and picks for Trey Murphy come the mid-season deadline. And maybe that's a move that's kind of certainly in their window and what they're looking at. And I think when you look at a guy like Trey Murphy III, he's never made an all-star team, but he's the kind of guy in terms of his combination of size, skill set, and age, particularly as well at 25, where you're going to be willing, I think, to throw a couple of those valuable first-round picks into play. But not just that, but you're probably going to be you're probably going to be interested in trading for a guy like that, even if it takes you out of something bigger. And what I mean by something bigger is I think the Warriors have probably turned down or not been interested in multiple deals here, and smaller than Trey Murphy. Like I'm talking, a Vucevic guy, for example, like something smaller where it's a helpful player. Maybe it's a fringe starter kind of thing. and they don't want to make a trade for the sake of making a trade because they would rather keep their assets. They'd rather keep their tradable salary for Giannis Antetokounmpo, the dream of trading for Giannis, right? And it's like, well, would we make this slight upgrade if it took us out of any, Giannis sweepstakes when or if that becomes available? And I think they probably have turned down multiple deals as a result of that. Trey Murphy is the kind of guy where, again, he hasn't made an all-star game, but I think he's the caliber of player in terms of his ascension in the league and his talent and also his fit on the team, where I would point to and say, I'm willing to trade for that guy, even if it takes me out of the Giannis sweepstakes, because the Giannis stuff is so improbable where, well, firstly, he would need to request a trade from Milwaukee. And secondly, he would, need to probably request specifically to be traded to the Warriors because otherwise there's teams that could outbid the Warriors for Giannis Antetokounmpo. And so Trey Murphy III is the kind of player where he's not Giannis. He's not a two-time MVP. He's never going to be a two-time MVP guy like Giannis. But if he's legit gettable, you are not passing on that type of player because you think, oh, well, that'll take us out of the running for Giannis, and we want to be, in the running for Giannis when or if that becomes available. Like, he's the dude. He's the dude you give up any chance of Giannis for. If that is on the table and possible, you go and get that player. I don't care about Giannis. I don't care about any other player in the league, right? If Trey Murphy III is available, and I'm not saying that he's Giannis Antetokounmpo. I'm not saying he's ever going to be a top 10 player in the league, but I think he's that good. He's at that age, and he's that good a fit for the Warriors specifically that if you can do it, I don't care about anyone. I don't care that it takes you out of the Giannis running. You make that move, right? And so hopefully the Warriors are quite aggressive in trying to get a Trey Murphy III trade done rather than, yes, they've made calls. How aggressive they're being and how interested they are, we'll wait and see. Right. Of course, they could have had Trey Murphy III not once but twice in the 2021 draft when they obviously took Kuminga 7th, Moody 14th, and Murphy goes 3 picks later to the Pelicans at 17. Şengün went 16 as well. So as okay as Kuminga and Moody have been as guys that have got to the end of their contracts, rookie contracts, and obviously from a Moody standpoint, he's now on a 3-year extension now. So obviously there's a chance he gets traded in the next 3 years, but he's contract for the Warriors for his first 7 years in the league now, which is fine. And he was a starter for 31 games at the end of last season. But obviously, if you can, if you could have drafted Trey Murphy III, you would have preferred that over Moses Moody. Not trying to hate on Moses too much, but it's obviously a mistake from a Warriors standpoint. The other kind of, I suppose, optimism here as we try and think about Trey Murphy III and whether he's an actual realistic trade target. The Pelicans are kind of a mess, and we saw what they did on draft night where they traded up from 23 to 13 to get Derek Queen and inexplicably, awfully gave their 2026 first-round pick unprotected to the Atlanta Hawks in the trade. Just a bewildering deal. And even if the Pelicans take a jump next season, which actually their team is okay, right? Like their team has some talent, but they're also in the West. And so it's going to be difficult for them to take a significant jump. And even if they do, well, they also gave the rights to like the Milwaukee pick. If they're actually better than Milwaukee, then the Hawks can get the Bucks pick instead. So that's just an absolutely abhorrent trade. And they're in a situation here where maybe the Warriors can take advantage of that kind of incompetence and get Trey Murphy at a point and at a time where if he was on most teams in the league, most teams would not ever entertain trading a 25-year-old rising star who's put up the numbers he did last season, who has a multifaceted skill set offensively. Like a lot of teams would just absolutely say no way. And it sounds like the Pelicans are saying that at the moment. But again, things can change. And this is a team that has a recent history of some questionable trades. The draft one with Queen was absolutely horrific from the moment it happened. Everyone was like, what the hell are you doing? The one just before that with Jordan Poole for CJ McCollum, like for a team that just doesn't want to pay the tax, never has, one of only 2 teams in the league to have never paid the luxury tax. why are you trading an expiring contract in CJ McCollum for an extra year of Jordan Poole, where you've got multiple guards now in Poole and DeJounte Murray, who's also on like 30 million, and you've just drafted Jeremiah Fears. You got 4 players now making over $25 million. Murphy's obviously one of them, and then you've got Poole, Murray, and Zion. Murphy clearly has the most value of those 4 players. Like, he's going to get you multiple first-round picks. I don't think any team's probably trading a first round of Zion right now. Like, I think that could change pretty quickly if you can get out on the floor early next season and play well. But the Zion thing, I think he probably would have been traded by now if they could have got something of value, and I don't think they can. And then Murray and Poole, like Murray's coming off a torn Achilles. You can't really trade him off that. And then Poole, obviously, they've just traded for, and it's not like you're going to get any, even if you wanted to retrade him, like this, it's not like you're going to get anything of value for him as well. So Trey Murphy's the only guy there who you could potentially shed long-term salary and try and reset your team with multiple first-round picks. And again, if Zion's a big key piece in this, because he's making his next 2 years after this one are like 42.2 and 44 point something $million over in each of the next 2 years. But those are non-guaranteed, and they are obviously conditional on how many games he plays, and also his weight at various points throughout the season as well. But if he hits those and he has those deals guaranteed for the next 2 years, then when you've got Zion, you've got Murray, you've got Poole, you've got Trey Murphy, all at least on at least 2 years to go on their contract, if not more. Then you got Herb Jones, he's going to have an extension kick in 2 years' time, and a reasonable one at that as well. Like, if you want to continue to duck the tax, like, he's still going to have to do some juggling here, and one of those pieces might have to be moved at some point. And again, if you want to move one of them and you want to reset and get a big haul in the process, Trey Murphy's the only one that the Pelicans can possibly deal to make that happen, right? Otherwise, at this point, like Zion, Murray, Poole, like, you're almost having to give up assets to get off those guys. Again, Zion could change that pretty quickly. He could become quite an attractive trade candidate if he comes out early next season. First of all, he's on the floor looking somewhat fit and playing well. Like, there's no questioning his talent, right? And I think there's a chance that he goes to another team and blossoms into a multi-time All-Star or something like that. And I've talked about him a little bit in regard to the Warriors previously. I don't think that makes sense while Draymond Green is on the team, but we'll see what happens maybe in the future. But Trey Murphy's certainly a perfect fit for the Warriors, no doubt about that. And I don't think the Warriors are going to get their hands on him, this offseason or mid-season even. But I would try, if I'm talking to Warrior fans right now and trying to offer a glimpse of hope here, a glimmer of hope in the Warriors actually getting their hands on him, I would point to the dysfunction at the Pelicans, the fact they just made that awful Derek Queen trade on draft night. And again, nothing against Derek Queen, it's just an awful trade, let's be honest. And also the fact, like, this is a team that's never wanted to pay the luxury tax and will actively make moves to make sure they duck under the luxury tax. And again, with the 4 players making big money right now, Trey Murphy's the only one with any significant value. And he has a lot of value, right? To the point where it would take a lot. Like, it would take a really steep price for the Warriors to be able to land him. And this is where I get to my 14 mock trade that I've created here, which is from everything that I've spoke to a few people about this, and obviously I've done it on the trade machine, and everything seems fine in terms of legalities. And I actually think, not to give myself a pat on the back, but I think it's somewhat close-ish in value, but you guys let me know. So this is the 14 mock trade that could be pulled off tomorrow, right? It could happen tomorrow. This doesn't have to wait for midseason. Again, I think ideally the Warriors would probably want a situation where they re-sign Kuminga on like $22.5 million, and then that's easy to flip for Trey Murphy III midseason. That's hopefully what might happen from a Warrior perspective. Obviously, you'd have to throw in a lot of picks, but it could just simply be a 2-team trade. Right now, given the basic compensation rules with Kuminga, it would have to be a multi-team trade. This is what it looks like. The Warriors receive Trey Murphy III, nothing else. The Pelicans receive Moses Moody, Nick Richards, Haywood Highsmith, 2026, 2028, and 2032 first-round picks from the Warriors. The Phoenix Suns received Jonathan Kuminga on that reported 4-year, $90 million contract that they are currently offering, according to multiple sources, including Fisher. And the Brooklyn Nets, they receive Grayson Allen, 2027 first-round pick from the Suns, which is going to be the worst, I think, of Utah, Cleveland, or Minnesota. A 2026 second-round pick from the Suns, which is tied to OKC, Dallas, or Philadelphia, and a 2030 second-round pick from the Pelicans. So, first of all, let's look at the other two teams. The Suns getting Kuminga. I think they would absolutely do this in a heartbeat. Basically, they're giving up Grayson Allen, a very, very late first-round pick, and 2 second-round picks for Jonathan Kuminga. And I think Grayson Allen with 3 years, $50 million on his contract, that's a pretty almost negative contract. You almost have to give up picks to get off him. And so to get Kuminga in that situation, I think they would do that in an absolute heartbeat. The Nets, on the other hand, would probably want more. Like, I think they're basically they're flipping Highsmith, who they just traded for Grayson Allen. Again, 3 years, $50 million remaining on his contract. They'd probably want something more in order to take on his contract than what will result as a late first-round pick and a couple of seconds. They're probably going to want more. I would like for Phoenix to probably give up more in that trade to the Nets, but the issue is the Suns don't have much in the way of assets, right? And would they be willing to give up another first-round pick? Maybe not. So I think from that standpoint, the Suns would certainly do it. I think the Nets would probably want to be incentivized a little bit more, but again, how the Suns could do that with an extra pick or something, I don't know, because again, they don't have a whole lot in the way of assets. From the other two teams, the Warriors and the Pelicans, the Warriors obviously getting Trey Murphy III. We've spoken about that. It would take Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, and 3 first-round picks. Would the Warriors do that? Oh, I might, but would would Joe Lacob and Mike Dunleavy Jr. do it? I have a hard time. I think that may be off, I think it's definitely start at 2, you go to 2 first-round picks, and I think if you could make it the 2026 and 2028 first-round picks when you'd think Steph will still be on the team, the 2032 pick is certainly going to have a lot of value, and that's what the Pelicans are probably going to want in this. 3 first-round picks plus your 2 lottery picks. It doesn't look great when you're going, well, we're trading our 7th pick and our 14th pick and 3 first-round picks for a guy that was drafted 17th. That doesn't look great on paper, but that's just the reality of what it is. Again, if the Warriors could say, all right, let's do it mid-season, let's just do Kuminga and 3 first-round picks for Murphy, that feels a lot better than having to add Moody into the equation. But again, of course, this offseason with the basic compensation rules, you'd have to add Moody into the equation right now. Again, this is a trade that can happen tomorrow if all 4 teams agreed. So yeah, I think from some of the responses on Twitter, I think Warrior fans would be happy with that. Whether the team would do it or not, I think is a different story altogether. I probably would do it, to be honest. I probably would do it because I just think Trey Murphy would elevate this team. You're still going to have room to make your signings of Horford, Melton, etc. I think he would just add so much from a fit standpoint. And of course, you're talking about a 25-year-old who can provide you some, and I'm not sure Trey Murphy's ever going to be a number 1 guy on a good playoff team. I'm not sure he's that level of player, but he's good enough where it's he's young and he gives you some insurance to make sure that you're not absolutely terrible, right, when Steph and Jimmy and Draymond are gone, when that 2032 pick comes around. Right, you're not absolutely terrible. You're gonna, in this situation, you keep Pods as well. So you got Pods and you got Trey Murphy and you've got Quentin Post and whatever else, I suppose, going forward beyond the Steph, Jimmy and Draymond years. Of course, again, they're contracted for 2 more years at this stage. You'd assume they might play beyond that, particularly Steph and hopefully Jimmy as well. But we'll just wait and see what happens there. But I think from a Warriors standpoint, if you're really desperate on trying to win a 5th championship while Steph Curry is somewhere near his prime, it's probably a trade as steep as the price is that you pull off. And from a Pelicans perspective, you're getting Moses Moody, who's a nice young player on a good contract. Again, he doesn't have star-level qualities written all over him, but he's a solid player who showed, again, towards the second half of last season that he can be a 5th starter maybe on a reasonable playoff team. That's a decent young player. And again, when you're making $11, $12 million a year, that's a good player to have on that contract. You get Nick Richards and Haywood Highsmith, who can be capable rotation players for you next season, but are also on expiring contracts. And I think that's the main point of them, particularly for a team like the Pelicans, who don't necessarily want big long-term contracts and want to get stuck in situations where they have to make moves they don't particularly want just to get under the luxury tax. And then 3 first-round picks from the Warriors, like, again, those 2028, 2032 picks when Steph's going to be like 40 in 2028, nearly 41, and 2032 he's obviously going to be out of the league by that point. Those picks are valuable. There's a reason why I think, the Warriors are pretty intent on keeping those picks, because Joe Lacob is worried about the state of the team post Steph Curry. And if you're giving up what results as a top 3, top 5 pick because of a trade you made in 2025, I mean, this is just the balance you're going to have to make. And if you desperately want to chase that 5th title with Steph, it's probably the kind of deal you're going to have to make, where you look at it and say, look, it looks ugly on paper when it's 7th pick and 14th pick for a guy that we could have had, who went 17th, and we could have had one of those 2 selections. And now we're trading our 7th and 14th and 3 additional first-round picks for him. Just the reality of the situation. It's the reality of being in a standpoint where the Warriors clearly don't view Kuminga as a long-term piece for them, and Moody's just a fine rotation piece for you. Trey Murphy III, on the other hand, looks like a rising star in the league. He's 25 years old. He's, a 6'8" guy who can shoot from distance, who's athletic and can get to the rim, has shown some signs of playmaking, probably has some significant improvements to make on defense. But again, he's got the size and length where he could potentially do that as well. And he's become a really good all-around player and continuing to rise. And you're in a situation, if you're New Orleans, where you don't have to trade him. Like, you don't have to trade Trey Murphy III. And so if you want him, you are going to have to give what people would most likely perceive as overs, right? It's what we saw in the Desmond Bane situation with his trade to the Orlando Magic, where I think initially people, say 4 first-round picks for Desmond Bane, like, that's a lot. That's overs. But then you dive a little deeper and you say, well, it's the Magic. They want to try and take the jump. They need shooting. Like, he's going to be a perfect fit for that team. They should be good for the next 10 years, really. So, like, those first-round picks shouldn't be top 3, 5, 10, whatever. They shouldn't be in the lottery necessarily either. So you can see why they did it, even if it's kind of like 4 first-round picks for Desmond Bane. Like, that's a lot. And it's like, from Memphis' standpoint, they didn't need to trade Desmond Bane, but if you're going to come at them with 4 first-round picks, it's kind of hard to say no. And that's what the Warriors are going to have to do with Trey Murphy, with the Pelicans, and trying to get Trey Murphy out there. It's like, you're going to have to pay a big price, but maybe that price is worth it for a guy who could unlock a lot of lineups and really take your team to the next level. So let me know what you think, guys, in regard to Trey Murphy III, in regard to that mock trade that I proposed this offseason, or whether you just wait for middle of the season where you could hopefully do Kuminga and picks for Murphy in a trade, and maybe the Pelicans get into a situation where they're even more dysfunctional because of what's happening with the team, what's happening with Zion, who again I think is a key piece of this, but we'll wait and see. Just other quick thoughts before I finish up here. Fisher reported that Horford, Melton, and Gary Payton II are all expected to sign once the Kuminga thing plays out. And then there's another group of free agency candidates, would call them, that includes Seth Curry, Malcolm Brogdon, and Cody Martin. What I want to say here is I'm not exactly sure why GP2 is in the lock category. So, for example, I think out of those like 6 players that have been mentioned there, I would have Brogdon as number 3 on my list. I would have Horford, Melton, Brogdon, and I would have him ahead of both GP2 and Seth Curry. And the reason I say that is because I think the Warriors do need some kind of, quality backup to Steph. We know Malcolm Brogdon won 6th Man of the Year a couple of years ago. I think he's a player that, if he gets fit and healthy, which again is a big if, he's the kind of guy that could average like 20 minutes a game for you. To me, Peyton and Seth Curry are more specialists. GP2 is a defensive specialist where even if he plays well, he's probably only going to average what he did last season, which was 15 minutes. And with Melton coming in, he might even play less. And then Seth Curry, again, excellent shooter, career high shooting numbers last season, albeit in a limited role. Again, 15 minutes a game for the Hornets. You could argue, well, in the Warriors, he'd be even more effective because he's going to get more open looks if he plays alongside his brother and stuff like that. He plays alongside Jimmy with his playmaking, all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, like, the Warriors have a lot of shooting guards. They've got Buddy Hield already. They've got Brandon Bajemski. They've got DeAnthony Melton. If you want to slip Moses down to the 2 guard spot, you probably can. Like, how many minutes is Seth Curry really going to get? It's probably max of 15 as well. So I just think Malcolm Brogdon probably should be more of a priority over Seth Curry and Gary Payton II. You can really only have 2 of those 3 guys, and to me, it would be Brogdon, and I don't really mind out of the other 2. I don't obviously it's interesting because one of them is a fan favorite and has been for a while, championship winner in GP2, and then the other is Steph Curry's brother, and there's obviously ties there as well. So in terms of Cody Martin, not sure why the Warriors are particularly interested. He's 6'5" defensive guy. Like, if they're going to bring back Peyton, as Fisher says, then I'm not sure why they need Cody Martin as well. He offers a little bit of extra size, but it's not like he's huge. He's only 6'5". Again, built his career off defense. His 3-point shooting, he's 30.8% for his career. I think he shot 11% for the Suns in his 14 games at the end of the last season. Like, that's just a guy to me. Like, how does he get in the rotation? I'm not sure. I don't see it. I would steer clear of him. Aside from that, I think bring Kuminga back most likely, I guess, whether it's on the qualifying offer or on a new deal. And then it's Horford is like your 11th guy. Melton is the 12th. I'm just working this out. I'm not saying 11th, 12th guy in the rotation. I'm saying on the roster at the moment. And then if Payton's your 13th, I suppose that leaves Curry and Brogdon for the 14th spot. Obviously, the Warriors have a history of not wanting to use the 15th spot for retaining flexibility and obviously lessening their payroll as well. So I'd be surprised if they use the 15th spot. And if they did, it might be on Will Richard or something like that, who's also been slated as a potential option on the main roster. I'm going to finish up there, guys. Let me know again if you have any thoughts on anything I've said in this episode on Trey Murphy, free agency, Kuminga, whatever it may be, the Warriors offseason. Thank you very much to those of you that have tuned in. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that'll be greatly appreciated. Obviously, first episode in about a month here, but once I get home next weekend, there'll be much more content to come. Again, hope you guys are all well and enjoy the rest of your week. I'll be back in a couple of weeks' time once I'm back home in my normal environment in Australia. Thanks again, guys.